Hello, everybody. My name is Reverend Lance McCune, and welcome to the first broadcast of Kappa TV, where faith and public safety connect. Now, I've been in ministry for close to 50 years, and part of that time I've been involved with law enforcement and clergy working with law enforcement for probably about 24 years. So I have things I want to share through this program, and we're going to develop this because I believe there's a need for this in our nation right now. One of the reasons why I decided to have this particular television program was to begin to deal with some of the issues that we've seen that have taken place in our nation. One of the things that startled me was all the unrest that was taking place in Minnesota, even to the place that churches were being attacked and protested against, and church services were being broken up by radical philosophy and theology. And I first noticed this type of pattern all the way back in 2014 when the Ferguson riots or disturbances took place. I noticed I was involved with government back then in the fact of law enforcement, and I noticed that this was not an organic response to an incident that took place in the community, but there were non-government organizations, NGOs, that had come into the city of Ferguson and began to stir unrest and turmoil, and it turned the whole community upside down. I remember talking with different clergy and law enforcement that were up there that were surprised at the degree of well, I don't say violence and strife that was being stirred up. You have to understand, myself being part of the older generation, we never saw things like this on an organized level that we see today. And even in 2014, it was startling. Last week, I heard a Senate testimony that said over $60 million were donated to non-government organizations and protest groups to bring unrest into the state of Minnesota, especially in their major cities. Now, what I found is as these unrests begin to develop in our communities are not better off, they're worse off. I've been involved in community policing for a long time, and one of the things that is important to me is that people can live in a safe environment, in a place where they can go to church and also live their lives peacefully. But if you'll notice, every one of these protests, every one of these incidents that arises, that begins to dissolve. And I also noticed there's a pattern to developing unrest in a community, and that is directly attacking law enforcement. I'm not talking about just the institution. I'm talking about the individual law enforcement people. If you'll notice all the things that are taking place, even though they might have tens of millions of dollars focused in unrest in a community, they focus on the individual police officer and their families. Why is that? Because they've learned over the years, people that want to stir up strife and anarchy have learned that's where you go. You can't just attack the entire program, law enforcement itself, because everybody believes that we should have laws. But what they do is they isolate law enforcement individuals and begin to attack them. In the city of Ferguson, as well as in the cities in Minnesota right now, we're seeing direct attacks. Years ago, over 2014 to now, that would be over 12 years ago, and to now, a direct attack against individual families as well as the law enforcement people themselves. Kappa TV represents this. Kappa stands for Clergy and Police Alliance. I've found in scripture there's a lot that can be said for clergy working alongside law enforcement so that there's community will come together and safety is there. What do I mean by that? Jesus, in the New Testament standard, Jesus was willing to break away from what he was doing just to go help a centurion and his family. We find in the case of Peter, Peter was willing to break away from his food and fellowship to go help a centurion. What was a centurion? A centurion was a leader of the Roman army who also was given the power to support and to make sure that the Roman laws were in place. So in the case of Jesus, in the case of Peter, then we find out in the case of Paul himself, all three of these major individuals in the New Testament worked along and worked with law enforcement on community issues, but even more importantly, on personal issues. Why is that? Because if we divide ourselves from the individuals that are out there risking their lives for us so that we can live in a safe community, we then begin to unravel this country. We begin to unravel everything we stand for, because without good people in law enforcement, we can't have a good country. And if we don't support those that are doing the job they should be doing to protect us, then we in turn will reap, well, I would say what you sow is what you reap. And so what has happened is a lot of clergy has pulled away from law enforcement individuals and their families, thinking it would be safer. But we found recently that even with that type of attitude, division, strife, bad things happen even within the church themselves. Now, when we talk about Kappa TV, where faith and public safety connect, we're not just talking about the incidents that took place in Minnesota and Ferguson or in other cities around the United States. We're talking about the overall concept of clergy and the faith community and houses of faith working with law enforcement so that we can live safe and peaceable lives, so that we can all follow what God has called us to do in our lives. Because if we don't live in a safe community, we can't fulfill what God has called us to do. Now, I've seen a trend, and the trend is a lot of faith-based leaders, instead of getting behind those that are trying to protect them, it's a lot easier to move their churches out of the trouble. But I found in scripture that the clergy that we follow, such as Jesus, Peter, and Paul, they were willing to go into the midst of difficult situations and help those that are hurting. That's our position as clergy. We're supposed to be the conscience and the voice of God in our communities and to work with those that are supporting the laws of our community and our nation. This is not happening by mistake when we see these attacks happening on a consistent basis. Again, ever since 2014, I've noticed this pattern, and every year it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, where you're seeing an attack against those that are in law enforcement, and now it's carrying into the faith community and the houses of faith. Now, we understand, we talk about all these problems, we talk about all these issues, but very seldom do we have the answers. Well, I believe that this program is going to begin to take apart the issues that we're facing in this nation, and we have the answers to the problems that are taking place in our community. I remember when I was first involved with local law enforcement, then national law enforcement, and I saw the organization that was taking place working against law enforcement on a national level as well as local and internationally. I got really discouraged. I thought, man, what are we going to do? This is terrible. But I went to the Lord in prayer. I said, Lord, what's the answer? What's the answer? And I hear this on the inside of me very clear and very plain. If the houses of faith will stand up for what is right and get involved, we can come against any NGOs or any nonprofit or any major billionaire that is funding destructive practices in our community and stand up unified with those in law enforcement so that we can live a peaceful life. You know, as we get into the things that we get into in the days ahead, we're going to do this program on a weekly basis. We're going to get into some practical things. We might step on some toes of clergy, and we probably will step on some toes in law enforcement, but that's okay because we can learn from each other. As long as we begin to develop the relationships with each other, we can grow together. No marriage is perfect, but if we're going to be living in a community together, we are married together. We're with each other. Law enforcement is part of our community, and clergy is too. Let us work together to build safe and resilient communities. And the beginnings of that is educating people how to do that. That is what Kappa TV is all about, where faith and public safety will connect. We will give you information. We will share with you our thoughts and maybe give you some things that maybe you haven't heard before. Instead of just saying the sky is falling, like they tell, one of those nursery rhymes, we're going to tell you how we can fix it, how we can come together, and how we can rebuild our communities that have had so much destruction and chaos taking place in our community. Now, I know some of you say, well, we're facing a Goliath here. We're talking $60 million just in Minnesota to come against law enforcement and those that support the laws of the land. That's okay. I serve a God. I'm of the Judeo-Christian faith. I have friends of mine that are Jewish rabbis, as well as evangelical and what we would call Protestant ministers. But we all come together in this one thought: let's live peaceably. Let's come together and work together with law enforcement so that our community can stay safe. So, what is Kappa TV all about? It's about where faith and public safety connect. We're going to help connect you with your community and with law enforcement. And law enforcement, you need to learn a few things about us and the clergy so that you can be more effective. I've noticed a trend over the years. The more and more the abuse and the attacks on law enforcement comes, the more and more law enforcement begins to turtle and go back within their system of just me and mine and against the world. That will not work. The community has to come together, and the leaders of the community are the clergy. They're there longer than any politician. They're there longer. Well, I told a politician one time, I said, I've been through so many mayors now, and actually I've been through so many chiefs of police, but the one group that always stays are the clergy. So let's build a strong community. Let clergy and police come together in alliance. Let Kappa TV show you how to do that. Because I believe in the days ahead, we're going to face a lot of difficulties. That's just life. But when we come together as one and unify against any disaster, natural, that's made by nature itself, as well as man-made, we can come together and work and do the things we need to do so that we can live in a safe and prosperous community and nation. So tell your friends, come and be a part of Kappa TV. I'm looking forward to the days ahead, and I believe you will too as you begin to connect with Kappa TV. God bless you. Have a great day. Share this with his friends, because next Monday will be an informational broadcast that will begin to show you how you can get more involved. That means clergy as well as law enforcement and law enforcement leadership. God bless you. Have a great day.